Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread and forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass against us. Lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom and the power and the glory forever and ever. Amen. Honourable youth members, I acknowledge that we're sitting today on the land of Aboriginal people and pay my respects to elders past and present. I thank them as First Australians for their careful custodianship of the land over countless generations. We're very fortunate in this country of ours to have two of the world's oldest continuing living cultures in Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples, whose lands, winds and waters we all now share. Welcome to the Queensland Parliament. It's my pleasure to have you here as Speaker. And of course, it is a privilege to be a Member of Parliament to represent those who live in all of our Queensland communities right around the state. It's important to note that Parliament is more than the government. Parliament includes our Premier, Cabinet Ministers, of course government backbenchers, but it also includes the opposition. That's the Leader of the Opposition, shadow spokespersons and members who also represent minor parties. Importantly, all of these people represent a geographical part of Queensland, and no matter what position you hold, there are 93 members of the Queensland Parliament, and every one of them is important because they represent one particular part of our state. Now, what you're going to be doing, of course, this is a Legal Studies Youth Parliament, and particularly important to think about the fact that you're going to be debating a bill and making laws. And that's something that's very important. It's not like choosing whether you like Pepsi or Coke. It's actually a really important decision, which is about making sure that you think very carefully about what it is that you're doing and what it is that you're debating and what you'd like to do. So importantly, the proposed changes could bring about very long-lasting changes to our state. The way we think about data and technology, and of course the way that our society works here in Queensland. So the bill that you'll be debating today includes a number of very challenging ideas that could significantly affect people in a positive way and sometimes maybe in a negative way and perhaps in an adverse sort of a way. That's why you have to be in touch with the people you represent. You've got to make sure that you're connected with your local communities. So, of course, think about those views, think about what you're here to do, but of course you're already doing that because you're part of our process being part of the Youth Parliament here today. There are also going to be members of Parliament who will be joining us today, and I thank them in advance for the work that they'll do in being here and doing our Youth Parliament. We have 35 schools participating today, and I understand that some have travelled quite some way to be here for the event. So you have Aquinas College, Australian Christian College Campus, Australian Christian College Distance Education, Bellbird Park State High School, Bremer State High School, Brigadine College, Brisbane School of Distance Education, Clayfield College, Fairholme College, Helensvale State High School, Kepnock State High School, Kimberley College, Marymount College, Mount Alverina College, Prince of Peace Lutheran College, Redbank Plains State High School, Redlands State College, welcome from far north Queensland, that's where I'm from, Robina State High School, Rochedale State High School, San Sisto College and St Eugene College. These schools make up the government on my right. And of course, we have Her Majesty's loyal opposition, or His Majesty's loyal opposition these days. We have our opposition made up of Genesis Christian College, Grace Lutheran College, Kedron State High School, Loretto College, McGregor State High School, Pacific Lutheran College, Redlands State College, Somerville House, Springwood State High School, St Patrick's College, Sunnybank State High School, The Gap State High School, the Glennie School, the Lakes College and Wavell State High School. I hope that all of you have had your briefing and you know that we don't try not to interject wherever you can. And of course also making sure that when you do hear something positive, even if it's not even on your own side, give a big hear to ensure that you encourage the speakers. Not everyone's going to be as comfortable as you might be in terms of speaking with this group in front of you. So please give them as much encouragement as you possibly can. I now declare that this Youth Parliament is open. I call the Honourable the Premier.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Good morning, Mr Speaker, youth members, youth ministers and the Youth Leader of House for the 2023 Legal Studies Youth Parliament. I see a future in the next few years for Queensland where we are proudly living up to the standard of the Queensland state that we so pride ourselves on. To live up to this standard, we need to ensure the safety and security of all citizens in our state. This can be done by developing a balance in our legal system which would provide better support and rehabilitation, resulting in a society which works together for the betterment of all its members. A fine state will always maintain our communities with safety paramount. Today sees another resplendent action of the government to fortify our security now and into the future. Now this will be a challenging goal for all of us to achieve. However, with the effort and support of all of us, I thoroughly believe we can achieve this together. Thank you, Mr Speaker.
Thank you, Honourable Youth Premier. I call the Youth Leader of the Opposition.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Queensland is my home. I want Queensland to be the best state it can be. I have a vision for our future. I want to live in a Queensland where housing, whether you are buying or renting, is affordable and available for all Queenslanders who need it. Affordable housing should not just be an aspiration. It should be something that is attainable, without resorting to a system of multi-generational living. Government needs to invest in long-term quality social housing to address affordable and secure accommodation in the future. I want to live in a Queensland where the government values and protects our natural environment through legislation and policy. Government has a responsibility to act as custodians of this beautiful state, ensuring a sustainable environment for generations of Queenslanders to come. My government will ensure that economic growth goes hand in hand with environmental conservation. Queensland has many unique and scientifically important habitats, including the Great Barrier Reef. We will ensure their protection is maintained. I want to live in a Queensland where the most young and vulnerable people in our criminal justice system are not treated as animals and I want to live in a Queensland where the most young and vulnerable people in our criminal justice systems are not treated as animals and their human rights violated.
Hear, hear.
People in our youth justice system are disproportionately from lower socioeconomic communities, come from families with domestic violence issues and are disengaged from schooling. Jails are harmful. Young people go to jail and then come back into the same life situation as before they entered, and they repeat crime. My government would invest in programs where young offenders would be housed in detention like farms, with mentors and counsellors. These centres would promote resilience, values and self-worth. It would provide flexible education options and give these children a safe environment to rehabilitate and grow. Thank you, Mr Speaker.
Thank you, Leader of the Opposition. I call the Youth Minister for the Information Economy.
Mr Speaker, I seek leave of the House to move a motion without notice.
Is leave granted? Leave is granted.
Mr Speaker, I move that so much of the standing and sessional orders be suspended, as would otherwise prevent the immediate presentation to the House for a Bill of Youth Act to enable the creation, collection and deployment of big data in Queensland, and the passing of such bill through all stages in one day.
The question is that the motion be agreed to. Those of that opinion say aye. Aye. Those against, no. I think the ayes have it. I call the Minister.
Mr Speaker, I present the bill and explanatory notes and move that the bill now be read a first time.
The question is that the bill be now read a first time. Those of that opinion say aye. Aye. Those against, no. I think the ayes have it. I call the Clerk.
Bureaucratic Information Gathering, Data Access Technology and Application Bill 2023.
I call the Minister.
Mr Speaker, I move that the bill now be read a second time. Thank you, Mr Speaker. It gives me great pleasure to inform the House of the 2023 Big Data Bill. Big data is a high-velocity information system which commonly utilises information from phones, satellites, sensors, cars and various forms of social media. The objective of the bill will enact the utilisation of all data assets to best assist our government in meeting the needs of our fast-growing Queensland population. The Big Data Bill will assist us in efficiently improving the lives and safety of citizens and pinpointing areas of desperate need within our communities. The advent of ever-evolving technology requires a fast-moving legislative system. In a world where our lives are digital, the evolution of technology has greatly changed our day-to-day experiences, and ensuring we keep up with that is the least we can do. Since the beginning of COVID-19 in 2020, our hospital and medical facilities have been overwhelmed with patients and illnesses. With the use of the Government Department of Dread, with consent, With consent, medical files and information can be kept confidentially to respond to further outbreaks of illnesses in the future. If a virus outbreak like COVID were to ever occur again, DRED could supply information to create timely and proportionate medical responses and avoid COVID lockdowns, which greatly impeded the Queensland state. If introduced, the Big Data Bill will also assist in managing crime, which has become a more increasingly prevalent issue in recent years. Data collected by the Queensland Service at any crime scenes can be stored within DRED to help ongoing investigations and crack down on our rising crime rate. As a government, we have a responsibility to keep Queenslanders safe. If this bill is going to help potentially save lives of innocent Queenslanders, then why are we hesitating? Instagram, Netflix, TikTok, Facebook, Spotify, Amazon, Google. What do all of these brands have in common? These are all names of companies currently using big data. If large corporations like these are using your information, then why shouldn't the government? Every day, thousands of young Queenslanders are signing consent for these companies to use and utilise their personal data with no information of where it's going or for what purpose it's being used. All our government is asking is to utilise the same data in a secure way to positively improve Queensland and make it a better place. So, if there are so many benefits for our state to use the same information, why are we hesitating? Mr. Speaker, it's very clear that the benefits of big data are immense and will not only assist us as a government in making decisions, but improving the lives of our Queenslanders who deserve change. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
I call the Youth Deputy Premier.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Bureaucratic Information Gathering, Data Access, Technology and Application Bill 2023, or the Big Data Bill, is a way to collect data relating to health, education, community welfare, safety and environmental management, as well as streamlining a process that has been used for decades. Data such as that currently collected in the Annual Assessment NAP Plan has allowed us to analyse how education programs are working, identify areas for improvement and schools requiring further support. Similarly, the introduction of My Health Record in 2019 enabled the collection and storage of an individual's medical information on their phone for personal use. However, with the establishment of DRED, this data can be further stored and analysed in order to inform the government on target areas in need of new infrastructure or better services, such as hospitals and community clinics. Other services, such as Instagram and Google, among other social media, participate in collecting users' data through recent searches or views in order to cater advertisements to their specified interests. Queenslanders' data has been collected and stored in various services for years. Through the introduction of DRED, this collection process will be streamlined in order to inform government decision-making and efficiently spend taxpayer dollars, overall increasing the productivity of Queensland as a community, providing effective assistance and better target vital resources to populations and individuals. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
I call the Youth Shadow Minister for the Information Economy.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I draw to the attention of the House how this big data bill is blatantly flawed. The first major flaw I see in it is the proposed Department of Dread, as it is aptly named, as it is a dreadful department that seeks to undermine Queensland's privacy. A single organisation staffed by fellow fallible humans will be made responsible for collecting and storing excessive amounts of big data, in indefinite storage of our people's medical information, educational results, and even DNA. This is, simply put, absurd. Members of the House, let us not live under the illusion that no government worker would be willing to betray their fellow citizens if it meant getting some extra cash. Storing all this highly sensitive data in an easily identifiable and targetable location with corruptible citizens managing it on a daily basis will cause trouble. A secondary issue, even if this is resolved, is that this system is vulnerable to hacking. They're putting our DNA in the hands of malicious minds. We have seen it in the past. Big data storage methods are flawed. They can and will be hacked, leaking confidential information of every Queenslander. Just look at the recent Optus and Medibank data breaches. But those were not the same stakes. Unlike DNA, people can change their phone number, their Medibank card, their driver's license. So let these previous breaches stand as a lesson of the dangers involved in big data. Let us learn from them before irreversible damage is done. Letting this bill pass as is means selling our citizens' lives in the name of a false security. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
I call the youth member for Mossman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise to speak on Queensland's plan for big data and how it is not our future. While claimed to be used for management in topics such as the environment, traffic control and public transparency, we are only being set up for future repercussions. Economically, big data, while having notable positives, is reliant on inexperienced systems that are not built to hold such large quantities of valuable and complex information. These fragile systems can lead to minor structure updates, creating major mismatched figures, impacting the reliability and accuracy of the data. Socially, big data will very likely lead to the scent of invaded privacy amongst citizens as surveillance increases and personal data becomes more accessible to systems that may be easily interfered with. An example of our fragile systems is the recent outrage around Optus and the personal and identity-orientated information of their customers being stolen through their big data-reliant network. This created a severe amount of outrage, fear, distrust, and paranoia throughout communities. Is this really the future you're looking forward to? In summary, I hope the risks of big data is understood by all, and this serves as a reminder that it is not our best future. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
I call the youth member for Jardine.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise to express my support for the Big Data Bill 2023. This legislation will revolutionise the way our government collects and uses data, ensuring more efficient and effective decision-making. The Big Data Bill 2023 will provide our policymakers with greater access to data, enabling them to make more informed decisions that will benefit our society. With this data, we can tackle issues such as climate change, economic inequality, and public health crises. Furthermore, this bill will establish stronger protections for the privacy and security of citizens' personal data, ensuring that sensitive information is only used for legitimate purposes. It will also promote transparency and accountability within the government's data collection and usage practices. I urge all of you to support this vital piece of legislation. Let's work together to build a brighter and more data-driven future for our nation. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
I call the youth member for Marimble.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise to speak on the matter that whilst the Big Data Bill does have virtuous and valuable ideas, there are some aspects that are simply not needed in today's society and that certain aspects of the bill contain preset limitations. Specifically, point A5 states that satellite and drone surveillance will be used to monitor land use, including traffic movement. This is where my main concern lies. Firstly, there is already a traffic helicopter and numerous cameras already underway in doing these observations, meaning it would be impractical to start flying a large heavy object around and above vehicles and pedestrians, not to mention it would be a distraction. Secondly, there are also several rules already in place regarding the usage of drones. Hefty fines do apply of up to $13,000 if the matter of infringement is taken to court. The safety of our community is our top priority. The more people see drones being flown around, the more they will think it is acceptable to fly them throughout busy areas. If we only limit drone use to rural and secluded areas where safety is less of a concern for the public, we are setting the correct standard for drone use. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
I call the youth member for Ithaca.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise to inform the House of my support of the Big Data Bill. The bill, once put into effect, will allow for the collection of DNA from certain consenting individuals, will introduce drone and satellite surveillance, will work to harness and monitor health and education data, and will lead to the establishment of a new department to oversee all collection, management and use of data in Queensland. The introduction of this bill will reduce criminal activity and lend support when it comes to finding offenders through its DNA collection services, as well as protect and monitor dangers such as pollution, vegetation clearing, and traffic movements through the use of its drone and satellite surveillance. The Big Data Bill aims to knock down heightened crime rates and optimise community welfare, environment management, and health and education, and has secured my support regarding its reliability and effectiveness. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
I call the youth member for Normanby.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise to speak on the important issue of privacy and collection of DNA. This bill is not compatible with human rights, more specifically the issue of privacy. The government's proposal to collect DNA from individuals for medical and civic purposes is a flagrant violation of an individual's right to privacy. Under Section 25 of the Human Rights Act 2019, a person has the right to not have the person's privacy, family, or correspondence unlawfully and arbitrarily interfered with, and not to have the person's reputation unlawfully attacked. Although the government claims that this bill complies with human rights, it does not. It enables the collection of both DNA and identified data from a range of sources, including medical, education, and other government records. This further increases the risk of data breach and the possibility of selling important data. I do not support the Big Data Bill due to the clear breach on human rights, and if we value our Queenslanders, you will not pass this bill. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
I call the Youth Minister for Small Business.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Today I want to share with the House the benefits of introducing big data. The technique of DNA sampling used to aid forensic evidence is revolutionary and will create a strong impact on the processing of criminal cases and societal processes. This data will increase accuracy in identifying suspects and exonerate innocent individuals. However, it will also be effective for generating decisions for corporate and small businesses. The process of big data collection was derived from the COVID-19 pandemic, where the federal and state governments were forced to increase their application of data. Big data allows information processing, enabling faster decision-making and process automation. From a small business perspective, this would improve pricing strategies, consumer analysis, and information on customer behaviour. DNA evidence can also be used to link individuals to crimes committed several decades ago, helping solve cold cases and bring closure to victims and their families. It can also help small businesses make more informed decisions and improve their operations to gain a competitive edge in their industry. Big data will change people's lives. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
I call the Youth Member for Pascoe.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Within the Big Data Bill, there are a variety of concerns presented, in particular, the legislation within Part 4, Clause 6. The major flaw is how DNA is intended to be collected, stored, and accessed in relation to the fundamentals of privacy protection. Part 4, Clause 6A states, DNA will be collected from individuals at any time on a voluntary basis and stored with identification. The issue surrounding an individual who voluntarily agrees to supply this data is the uneducated view on biometric materials, where in doing so, they unintentionally concern the privacy of others. Studies have indicated that most people of European ancestry can be identified from a relative's DNA. What is most disconcerting is that a relative can be as distant as a third cousin. Although there is only a small amount of DNA, with access to data such as the census or other public records, a family tree can be easily constructed. So how will this ensure the information is stored with the highest ethical and legal standards upheld? Is the potential security trade-off worth the benefits when the privacy of the very community it works to represent is put at risk? Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
I call the Youth Member for Gilbert.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise to inform the House on how the Big Data Bill will benefit the Queensland health system, especially the endemic and pandemic management. We are all aware that the health system is decentralized, and COVID-19 has demonstrated how incredibly vulnerable this makes us. Our systems and structures are reactionary to emergency situations such as pandemics, and with the Big Data Bill, we will manage emergency crises more quickly and effectively, ideally even prevent them completely. As clarified in Clause 7, data collection will be centralized and therefore enable us to develop statistics about relations between health-related factors such as age and sex and the outcome of disease. Through this analysis, our response to health threats will become more dynamic. Studies have proven that COVID-19 is more prone to spread with certain blood groups. Individuals with the blood type O negative are the least likely to get infected, but the most inclined to become superspreaders. Knowledge like this is crucial for handling disease outbreaks competently. It is discovered through the usage of big data analysis and saves lives. If we pass this bill, the health and safety of everyone will benefit. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
I call the Youth Member for Yarraman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Today I stand before you to mention the blatant breach of privacy rights that this big data bill brings to our Queensland. As a member for Yarraman, it has come to my attention that this issue is severely threatening to the safety and security of the people of Queensland. This is clearly represented in Clause 6, Section B, C, D and E, all of which violate basic human rights and privacy. DNA collection in general, if done without proper consent as is planned to be done in this bill, represented in Clause 6, Section E, can be considered a violation of one's rights to privacy and genetic autonomy. Additionally, it can be used to wrongly profile and discriminate against individuals, leading to wrongful detention or arrest. Furthermore, governments have also been known to use DNA collection for excessive surveillance and to engage in social control, as which from what is included in this bill, it could be assumed that the Australian government plans to do so. Now come on, Mr. Speaker, this is just dangerous to our future as a country and is giving the government a blank check. Finally, the data collected by DNA can be used for commercial gain, leading to a lack of transparency in how one's private sensitive information is being used, as the DNA is stored with information as stated in Clause 6, Section C, which is then no longer available to you, making it possible to be used for anything that the government wishes. It is generally accepted that DNA can provide a number of benefits in relation to crime investigation and also a range of civic benefits. However, these must not come at the cost of negating one's individual rights to privacy and ownership of their biological material. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
I call the youth member for Dawson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I draw to the attention of the House the importance of the Big Data Bill to the electorate of Dawson, more specifically, the satellite and drone surveillance proposed by the bill. Due to the rural nature of the Dawson area, the division is largely dependent on its farmland for economic stability. For this reason, any events that affect the quality or usability of farmland have an equally devastating economic effect on the rest of the area. One of Queensland's largest threats to local farmland is bushfires, as they can destroy crops and render land unusable. Due to their major impact, bushfires should be detected, located, and isolated as quickly as possible to mitigate damages. Increasing the level of surveillance in rural areas will assist greatly with locating bushfires that otherwise wouldn't be discovered until they pose a much more significant risk. For this reason, the implementation of satellite and drone surveillance to monitor rural land will have a very positive impact on the economic stability of the area. This point considered, there can be no doubt of the positive effect of the implementation of increased surveillance as proposed by the Big Data Bill. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
I call the youth member for Paru.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise to speak on behalf of my electorate to express my concerns surrounding the Bureaucratic Information Gathering, Data Access Technology and Application Bill, also known as the Big Data Bill. I'd like to discuss the proposed Department of Dread and especially Clause 4, which I believe is far too broad. Section 2, subsection D mentions the harvesting and monitoring of health and education data, which gives us no real definition of what's going to happen with the data that's being collected. This also raises the question of which government agencies will have access to the data and how it actually benefits the public. I believe that this is a waste of taxpayers' dollars and we would be much better off investing the money to go towards protecting our state's data rather than collecting and spreading it broadly throughout the government. Dread is a double layer of bureaucracy that is just plain unnecessary. Furthermore, I question the extent to which this information is a breach of privacy. I note the statement of compatibility does say that the intrusion is justified, but again, a redrafting of Clause 4D, subsection 2D could be achieved, and this would sit more comfortably with the parameters of just how a balance between need to protect public safety with the sharing of data for, say, COVID sits with public safety. Mr. Speaker, I urge the government to reconsider this and work towards creating more clarity for the people of Queensland. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
I call the Youth Minister for Police.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise to express my support of the proposed bill regarding the creation, collection and deployment of big data throughout Queensland. As the Youth Minister for Police, I understand that through utilising big data, we will gain invaluable insights and information that will enhance our efforts to prevent crime. Specifically, patterns, trends and relationships presented in big data will allow more effective investigations into criminal activity, as well as identification of root causes of crime and how they can be eliminated. For example, youth crime, a pressing issue in Queensland's criminal justice system, can be better understood through this data,
and how preventative measures can be taken and the needs of the youth addressed. Thus, the proposed bill holds immense potential to improve Queensland's criminal justice system. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
I call the youth member for Mackenzie.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I wish to draw the attention of the House to the consequences of the creation of a DNA databank in Queensland as it pertains to Clause 5, Subclause D of the Big Data Bill. Imagine having one singular place where all the information of every Queenslander is stored. We all know what happened with Optus just a few months ago. The citizens of my electorate understand how serious the Optus hacks were. Some of them had their own data stolen. We know the risks of giving our personal information to an irresponsible organisation. How should we be expected to trust a department that has not even consulted with a security company or data handling service? Unless we can be assured that the proper steps will be taken for the protection of our data, our identity, we must not let this bill pass. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
I call the youth member for Ballyando.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. At the outset, I congratulate the Youth Minister for the Information Economy for bringing to the House the Big Data Bill. I'm here today to talk to you about the importance of new data privacy laws. In the digital age we live in, data has become an incredibly valuable commodity. Unfortunately, with the rise of social media, our personal information is being collected, analysed and used without our consent. This is a serious issue affecting primarily our youth who spend a significant amount of time online.
Hear, hear.
We share our personal information on social media sites, shopping sites and even gaming apps, but we rarely think where this information goes. The good news is that there are new data privacy laws that require companies to be transparent about how they use our information. I urge my fellow parliamentarians that we need this law as we care about our privacy and we want to protect our personal information. So I urge you to vote in the affirmative of this bill. Our future is at stake and it's up to us to protect it. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
I call the youth member for Maranoa.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise to speak against the proposed implementation of the collection of big data. The introduction of satellite and drone surveillance gives rise to escalating individual privacy threats which cannot be overlooked. Clause 8 suggests the benefits of employing such surveillance to monitor the use of land for vegetation and weed clearing, stock numbers, pollution and traffic movement. Though, what protocols ensure the use of these devices for their specified purposes? Modern technology fosters wide-range access and use of advanced radar satellite imagery and long-term preservation of graphic records through digital storage systems. Thus, such ambiguous regulations generate an environment in which potential breaches of privacy readily exist. Just last year, the obligatory privacy of a Gold Coast woman was violated after finding a drone 3 metres from the bathroom window of a high-rise building, with the Civil Aviation Safety Authority receiving over 3,000 complaints a year regarding drone spying concerns. While collection of big data is necessary for optimized effectiveness of government decisions, a balance must be established between the compilation and storage of data and the protection and privacy of the community. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
I call the youth member for Lockhart.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise to speak about the Big Data Bill 2023. This is an act which will allow for the creation, collection and deployment of big data in Queensland. The aim of the bill is to have a collection of data which can be used for government services and projects. Due to the large improvements in the collection of data, there is opportunity to use data collection within vital departments such as the police force and healthcare system. This could drastically improve the ability of the police to investigate and prevent crimes. The data will be moderated and collected through the creation of the Department of Dread. The Department of Dread will have the role of using ethical processes in the collection and management of big data. A department such as Dread will allow for the analysing of data to remain morally sound so the government and government departments can use the advantages of the data without violating the privacy rights of citizens. The Big Data Bill 2023 will improve the prevention and resolution of crime and the prediction and prevention of future illnesses. This will all be able to be achieved using the personal data of citizens and their families. Overall, the Bureaucratic Information Gathering, Data Access Technology and Application Bill 2023 will greatly improve the lives of Queenslanders. I commend the bill to the House.
I call the youth member for Walsh.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise to inform the House of a concern related to the Big Data Bill. The use of drones for traffic control and environmental management allowed for in the bill. raises certain privacy concerns as these devices could capture and record data of individuals. For example, images of people in their own backyards. Under Part 3 of the Privacy Act 1988, it states that the act or practice breaches an Australian privacy principle in relation to personal information about the individual. Such recordings that the government may be able to obtain is personal information, and this breaches the rules outlined in the Privacy Act of 1988. Questions are raised about legitimate drone use as the potential misuse of the data collected. Without proper reassurance that this data cannot be taken and stored, the rights of individuals may be breached. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The youth member for Albert.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As a member of the committee, of course, I'm in favour of the introduction of the Purpose Reform Bill. The DREAD legislation specifies the purpose of which DNA can be collected and conditions under which will be stored. Ultimately, providing secure, confidential storage of data, especially DNA and other personal information, is a significant responsibility. The provisions under this clause will increase the ability of Queensland Police Service to investigate and prevent crime. If all these steps are taken, it will lead to an enhanced level of certainty when a person is charged with crime and convicted of it. If Queensland Police had enhanced access to DNA databases, this would prevent alleged offenders from being investigated unnecessarily. As a result, police investigations can be conducted more effectively with fewer resources. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
I call the youth member for Palmer.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Today, I want to inform the House of the issues with the proposed Big Data Bill of Queensland. The Big Data Bill has security concerns, specifically security and privacy breaches. As technology develops over time, there is no guarantee that the data of Queensland citizens will be properly protected. Big data stats show that the creation, capturing, copying, and consumption of data went up by a staggering 5,000% between 2010 and 2020. Data sharing and storing has become more prevalent in recent years, but that does not mean it should be legalised under the Big Data Bill. The more data that is collected and stored by the Queensland Government, the more data that there is available to be hacked and used for malicious purposes. The Department of DREAD oversees the harvesting, management, and application of data in Queensland, and as a result, there will be problems with how the data is processed or analysed. The algorithms utilised by DREAD will have flaws as a result of any new technology, further increasing the risk for privacy and security breaches. Do we, as a Queensland community, really want our data being collected and processed by DREAD, when there are little to no methods of ensuring the security and privacy of our data? Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
I call the youth member for Endeavour.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I draw to the attention of the House our own Great Barrier Reef. The Great Barrier Reef is both a natural wonder and a crucial component of the Australian economy, bringing about $6.4 billion and over 60,000 jobs. The Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people view it as a major cultural symbol and yet as a global icon. Due to reasons like rising sea temperatures brought about by climate change, chemical and pollution, overfishing and coastal development, the Great Barrier Reef is deteriorating. Internationally renowned for its outstanding biodiversity, losing the Great Barrier Reef would result in the permanent alteration of food webs and the extinction of many economically significant species. Australia was the first nation to ratify the World Heritage Convention in 1974, and as such it is obligated to preserve both the natural and cultural heritage of the world, including the Great Barrier Reef. Notwithstanding the numerous projects that Queensland and Australia as a whole have in place, further consideration needs to take place as many are clamouring to place the Great Barrier Reef on the endangered list, which could have an impact on its designation as a World Heritage status. I urge you all to make this a priority that needs action before it's too late. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
I call the youth member for Burpengary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise to speak on the Act that will introduce the allowing for the collection of DNA from individuals. DNA testing ensures accuracy and fairness in the criminal justice system and provides extensive research in medical fields. The analysis of DNA sequences allows police crime labs to develop profiles that can either be used in the process of identifying suspects or exonerating those mistakenly accused of crimes. The Act also states that DNA collection of individuals will be completely voluntary. However, despite the terms of this Act being totally optional,
There is growing controversy which argues that DNA testing is an invasion of privacy. To these people, I ask, are you aware of how much of your personal information has already been stored in government systems? From your birth certificate to your census, your information is stored. Has this affected your life? DNA testing ensures a more safe and secure society for all citizens under the Queensland Government. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
I call the Youth Minister for Health.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise to speak on the topic of the Bureaucratic Information Gathering Data Access Technology and Application Bill 2023. This bill is proposed to enhance healthcare and education, environmental management and community and welfare safety. By harnessing the power of big data to optimise the efficiency and effectiveness of government decision-making, the Big Data Bill will in effect be optimised and targeted at the enhancement of the lives of Queensland citizens. It is because of this that I strongly believe the Big Data Bill will not only support economic and governmental growth, but it will provide a foundation for vital resources and assistance to specified target populations and individuals. Mr. Speaker, it is a fact of modern life that data is all around us. Without data, the government would be working in the dark, unable to determine the best ways to spend taxpayers' money to benefit all Queenslanders. In my Department of Health, we have seen this as we battled the COVID-19 pandemic. Big data helped us to target save vulnerable Queenslanders during the worst pandemic of our lifetimes. This bill extends the use of data to ensure that health spending is targeted, to ensure that money goes where it is needed. Unlike the opposition, we don't propose building hospitals in marginal seats to try to win elections. Through the Big Data Bill, we can build hospitals where they are most needed. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
I call the Youth Member for Diamantina.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise in strong support of the Bureaucratic Information Gathering Data Access Technology and Application Bill 2023. As a member for a rural and regional community such as Diamantina, Part 5, Clause 8 is vital for rural and regional communities in allowing for drone surveillance of aspects such as weeds and stock to ensure that rural farmers within my constituency can effectively operate their farms and provide the food for all Queenslanders. I believe that those opposite by opposing this bill are deplorably stagnating our rural and regional communities from advancing and stagnating Queensland's growth into the 21st century era. I strongly support all members of the House to come together in support of the Big Data Bill 2023 to bring Queensland into a modern era in line with other states throughout the Commonwealth of Australia. The opposition of this bill cannot proceed and must be supported by all members. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
I call the Youth Member for Archer.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise to inform the House of the benefits that the Big Data Bill 2023 can provide to Queensland economy. The bill is aimed to maximise the efficiency and effectiveness of key stakeholder groups such as the Queensland Police Service and Legal Aid Australia. Previously, Queensland has suffered from issues of fragmentation of government and decentralisation of organisational bodies. Through the creation of DREAD, all aspects of the data collection will be efficiently handled. This includes DNA collection, harvesting and monitoring of health and education data, and drone and satellite surveillance. By allowing one body to organise and collect all data, time and money will be saved. For those concerned about privacy, Section 25 and 24 of the Human Rights Act 2019 are upheld by not releasing or publishing any data to the public. You can also gain access to your data by following the procedure outlined within this bill. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
I call the Youth Minister for Tourism.
The Big Data Bill needs to be passed by this Parliament, as this bill is going to greatly help with the many issues our great state has. For one, do you know how many of our Queensland people die from suicide a year? Over 800. I'm willing to bet that if we knew that they were going through these struggles, we would be able to prevent at least a portion of these tragedies. Because we would have the knowledge of their struggles and we would be able to save them. This is one of many reasons that we should support this bill. Most of the opposition is just using baseless fear-mongering and the use of dread in order to say anything that can go wrong will go wrong. How much are you willing to bet that everything will go wrong just to stop a little bit of privacy issues that honestly the bill can be amended and we can fix? Will you save our people? Vote for this. For our people, the Queenslanders. Thank you.
Before calling the Minister, are there any other members who wish to speak to the bill during the second reading debate? I call the Youth Minister for the Information Economy.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. I would like to thank all youth members for both the government opposition for their valued input on this bill. I would firstly like to address the issues surrounding the right to privacy of our Queenslanders. Data will not be released to the public or anyone and will be kept and stored confidentially within DRED. This information will stay within the government system and not only be shared with the departments that are responsible for delivering civil, social, environmental, educational, health and safety outcomes for the Queenslanders' benefits. The benefits of the system will then be utilised to better improve Queenslanders' lives and lifestyles. Utilising the DNA and data found in crime scenes is vital for the safety of citizens. The protection of the data and information of criminals should not be a priority over the safety of our Queenslanders. I would like to address the concern, also, surrounding the breaching of human rights. This bill works with human rights, as it only limits them to an extent which is reasonable and justifiable within law, to improve people's lives and look after our Queenslanders. The possible issues surrounding the extra cost to Queensland Government has also been considered throughout the creation of this bill. The costs and financial repercussions and the use of big data have been considered while drafting this bill, and there will be provision made in the budget for implementation of the system and the Department of DRED. Putting extra money aside for the protection and benefit of Queenslanders is a high priority for our government. Without big data, slower studies then have to be financed to research the issues that big data could easily and more effectively cover in a shorter time span. The use of big data is important and is essential to all Queenslanders, and the benefits of the system so significantly outweigh any possible disadvantages we face. Mr Speaker, I commend the bill to the House.
Honourable members, the question is that the bill be now read a second time. Those of that opinion say aye. Aye. Those against, no. I think the ayes have it. I call the clerk.
Bureaucratic Information Gathering, Data Access, Technology and Application Bill 2023.
I should let everyone know that when you hear a no like that, it's quite often that it's not that people are opposing the bill, they're just not supporting it. Moving to private member statements. Youth Member for Herbert.
According to 2022 NAPLAN results recorded by ACARA, Queensland ranks 6th of 8 states and territories for all assessed areas of numeracy, reading and writing. These results have remained since 2011. The academic results of the Year 9s not only reflect the students of Herbert, but other year levels that are assessed, hence the entirety of Queensland. The stagnance of Queensland's NAPLAN results are a potential result of influencing factors. They include the spread population of our state compared to other densely populated states such as New South Wales and Victoria that come first and second. Additionally, the economic factors and funding of public transport correlates to the attendance and accessibility of schools. Academia is an area to be maintained, improved, and consistently addressed in our country. Addressing these factors will increase the performance of the state in fundamental areas of literature and numeracy, and therefore increase the welfare of our state's success. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
I call the Youth Member for Stone.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Today I stand before you to address a pressing social issue that is affecting our society. The issue that I would like to bring to your attention is the rising mental health concern among the youth of Queensland. Mental health is a significant concern that has long been neglected in our society. The COVID-19 pandemic has only added to the existing mental health concerns, and the youth of our state are particularly vulnerable to its effects. The pandemic has disrupted our lives, and the uncertainty surrounding it has caused a lot of stress and anxiety among the youth. According to a recent study, over 30% of young Australians are experiencing high levels of psychological distress. This is an alarming figure and something that needs to be addressed urgently. As parliamentarians, we have a responsibility to raise awareness about mental health issues and work towards finding solutions to address them. We need to ensure that mental health services are easily accessible for everyone, regardless of their background or financial status. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
I call the Youth Member for Local Government.
I rise to inform the court today as a Member of Parliament on a topical issue not just affecting me but all of the women in this court and within Queensland. Queensland is continuing to not give women the equity they deserve. After all the fighting, protesting and lives lost trying to allow women the same rights as men, we are not yet again still not heard and our opinions not valid. Isn't that a concern, Mr. Speaker? Indeed, the Queensland Women's Strategy 2022 to 27 provides a framework for all Queenslanders to strengthen and support the rights of our Queensland women and work towards achieving a gender-equal Queensland. However, we as a community are letting our mothers, daughters and all the women in our lives down. The vision for our women's strategy promises equal rights and equal access to opportunities available. Women in the House, does that not sound promising, that we are safe and valued in our community, that we are given the same opportunity as our male counterparts? Despite what they claim, this promise to all us women in Queensland is a far stretch from being kept when just last year Emma Lovell, an innocent Australian woman, was let down after she was murdered in her own home. We are still being paid 15.6% less on average than the men who are doing the same job, and to add to this, 426 young females aged between 11 and 17 were held in watch houses just recently. Indeed, if this is not enough evidence already that women are clearly not safe or valued when they are being murdered in their own home or being detained for weeks at a time, it is disheartening and terrifying to know that this is happening to our women and that we as a community collectively claimed they were safe and celebrated. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
I call the youth member for Saltwater.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise to this Assembly to discuss the issue of homelessness and the current housing crisis sweeping Queensland streets. Affecting 9,700 people in Brisbane alone, these people are impacted mentally, but they are also exposed to physical harm out on the streets. We need to not only address this current issue, by continuing to build our promised 13,000 homes by 2027, but to address the root cause of homelessness in Queensland. Hence, I pose this question: why must we wait until people are trapped in the cycle of homelessness before we offer our help? The solution I propose would entail early intervention strategies, such as greater efforts to keep kids in schools, preventing dropouts, whom then are 4.5 times more likely to experience homelessness in their future. Kids are our future. Educate the kids, safeguard the future. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
I call the youth member for Banksia.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In the last years, between 2019 and 2022, there has been an increase in the rise of youth crime, and during these last years, the sentence of youth offenders have been too lenient. Victims of youth crimes have not been delivered justice, and the police are tackling these youth offenders in ineffective ways. According to the Australian Bureau of Statistics on Youth Crime, the youth offender rate was 1,778 people per 100,000 persons aged 10 and 17 years in 2021 to 2022. According to the Australian Bureau of Statistics, acts intended to cause injury was the most common principal offence for offenders aged 11 to 17 years. It has been reported in the ABC News that Queensland's victims of crime claim the legal system favours young offenders, letting them get off easy and not providing justice to the victims and their families. Research from Griffith University shows young people who spend time at these youth detentions are victims themselves because they have been subjected to a range of traumatic events. My message is to law enforcement, focusing more on not only apprehending youth criminals, but enforcing harsher punishments and creating more opportunities for youth criminals. For example, putting in more educational programs to reintegrate members into society, offering jobs and sporting programs as an alternative, sentencing youth offenders to help with community services, business, and various public centres. These methods can be used to implement youth offenders to turn over a new leaf and become an integral member of society. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
I call the youth member for Wilson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Today I rise to speak on the matter under Section 280 in the Queensland Criminal Code 1899, where it currently enables parents or a person in the place of a parent to use physical discipline as a form of behavioural management. A comment made by Professor Daryl Higgins directly demonstrates the negative outcomes physical discipline have on a child and how there is no evidence suggesting it is effective. This was further supported by the World Health Organization, which agrees that corporal punishment is linked to a range of negative outcomes for children across countries and cultures, including physical and mental ill health, impaired cognitive and socio-emotional development, poor educational outcomes, increased aggression and perpetration of violence. They continue to express that it is in fact a violation of a child's human rights. A survey answered by Australian parents demonstrated that 80% recall physical discipline being used on them as children, and that 50 to 80% say they physically discipline their children. Considering the growing rates of domestic and family violence in this state and country, is it not time that we draw a line in the sand around corporal punishment? The repeal of Section 280 of the Queensland Criminal Code can and will only bring positive outcomes for parents and children across Queensland. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Call the youth member for Fitzroy.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise to speak on the issue of recidivism among young Queensland youths. Are you aware that the Youth Justice Act mentions the word mental health only 6 times throughout the 327-page document? According to the Australian Institute of Health and Welfare, between 1998 and 2014, the rate of young people aged 12 to 17 with a major depressive disorder increased from 2.9% to 5%. I propose an amendment to Section 150, Paragraph 1H of the Youth Justice Act to mandate a pre-sentence mental health and personal circumstance report to be taken into consideration before a sentence is imposed. A similar amendment to this was introduced in Texas, which saw a reduced youth incarceration rate of 38%, a youth crime reduction rate of 49% in 6 years after closing 8 youth detention centers and saving $150 million US. Simply getting tough on crime is not working. The government needs a new approach, and I believe that the mandatory pre-sentence report could be a key tool to reduce recidivism. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Yeah. I call the youth member for Talabudra.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise to speak about the critical and complex issue where the government is doing nothing to assist the challenges Queenslanders face every day in relation to housing. A lack of housing options for Queenslanders is not only jeopardising major economic opportunities but also leaving Queenslanders with no safe place when needed. In Queensland, domestic and family violence is one of the main driving factors behind homelessness. Sadly, many children, women and men have experienced or even bared witness to abuse and violent behaviours, forcing them to flee their home. Homelessness is rising in areas where there is shortage of affordable housing and private rental housing. Right now, the challenges are rising as are cost of living pressures. While housing availability continues to, homelessness can affect anyone. Approximately 20,000 people in Queensland are experiencing homelessness. This is 1 in every 117 Queenslanders. Approximately 35% of those have experienced some form of domestic and family violence, and over 50% accessed homelessness services are under the age of 25. The government has the ability to find solutions to help ease this crisis. For instance, they could increase the supply of appropriate and affordable housing, including social housing, to ease the pressure. This government needs to do more to support our most vulnerable Queenslanders. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Call the youth member for Cliffdale.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise to speak on the issue of youth justice. Every day, youth recidivism in Queensland is escalating. The Youth Justice Act 1992 is not working to stop youth crime. Different stakeholders are calling for different approaches, from the government and police being harsh on youth crime to youth advocates who believe an alternative, proactive, not reactive system is needed. Something must be done, as the 2023 Productivity Report by the Commonwealth Government on Government Services found the rate of recidivism in Queensland is the highest youth recidivism rate of any state or territory in the nation. This is unacceptable. While harsher sentencing is an option, alternatives like a whole-government approach suggested by Peak Care Queensland should be adopted. This would involve early intervention with vulnerable children. For example, children with fetal alcohol syndrome or children at risk from trauma. We need to identify those who are vulnerable and provide them with counselling, education and support before there is an issue. The long-term, long-lasting solution to youth recidivism is about breaking the intergenerational cycle. We need to be proactive, not reactive. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Yeah. I call the youth member for Sator.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As the youth member for Sara, I'm here today on behalf of every individual of the age of 16 or younger employed in unskilled labour receiving a pay rate as low as $7.78 per hour at minimum wage. And the question I want to present to you is why? Why is that the case when young people are handling the same workload as an average adult but getting paid half their rate? Act 2004-88, Section 31, International Law, the legislation against ageism, protects young people against discrimination in the workplace. However, However, young people are still getting paid unfairly today, which is a major issue and needs to be addressed. This also ties in with the Australian gender pay gap favouring men, taking almost 100 years to be reduced to 13.3%. Taken from this, we can all agree that the government is doing nothing but repeating similar scenarios, but this time with young people. This is causing conflict within our community, and I'm extremely worried for the future of our young Queenslanders. The youth amongst us and I demand change. We want equal pay for equal work. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
I call the youth member for Bokara.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Today I want to share with the House the issue of youth crime. Youth crime is everywhere you go, and it's happening nearly every day. The youths of this region are getting out of hand, and they're going out and committing these criminal offences, and the people of this state are having to pay for it. They're getting robbed and harassed for no reason except that the youths are bored and think they can get away with it. It's getting out of hand and no one can stop them. The punishments for youth crime are not harsh enough, so if these youths do end up getting caught, then they don't get more than a slap on the wrist and then they are on their way again. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Call the youth member for Nagoa.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I stand before you to speak about an event that has a rich and profound history, the Olympics. As the host of the 2032 Olympics, Brisbane will be the centre of the world's attention. People will flock to explore the city and enjoy it. The Games are set to deliver a $4.6 billion economic boost to tourism. Just like the whole world knows about Sydney and Melbourne, Brisbane will become a household name across the world. In addition to a significant boost for tourism, the economy will be less strained, as pre-existing facilities will simply be upgraded for use across the state. And for the average Queenslander, they will have renewed confidence and joy in their city. These upgrades would be needed even without the Olympics, as Brisbane is a rapidly growing city. Now the future looks bright for Queensland because the rest of the world is looking at the state and what will happen here in the next 5 to 10 years. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
I call the Youth Minister for Natural Resources.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Today, I would like to share with the House the issue of teacher shortages within the Queensland education system. In recent years, there has been a large decline in the number of active teachers in Queensland schools. The Queensland Teachers Union found that 2/3 of teachers were working outside their specialty. This can lead to significant stress levels for both students and teachers in Queensland. The understaffing of teachers increases by 5% each year. Specifically in rural areas, there is not enough teachers to adequately provide students with the education and support that they need. To mend this issue, we need to retain teachers in their early years of teaching. This can be accomplished with positive experiences and incentives. Furthermore, this issue goes beyond just the education industry. Many areas of employment struggle to retain new staff. We should be providing new employees with the positivity they need to enjoy their new profession. Ultimately, we need to address the teacher shortage in Queensland so that students receive a stronger education and teachers are not pushed outside their limits. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Call the youth member for Zamia.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Today, I would like to inform the House on an ongoing issue that entails shark nets in Queensland. A tracker developed by Humane Society International Australia and the Australian Marine Conservation Society reveals 139 marine animals have been trapped and brutally killed in Queensland shark nets since May of last year. Because of shark nets, innocent sea life are being sacrificed for the desires of Queensland citizens. The Australian and Queensland governments share responsibility for managing the Great Barrier Reef. The Great Barrier Reef is one of the richest, most diverse natural ecosystems on Earth. At 348,000 kilometres, it's also the world's largest, most extensive coral reef, and it lies here within the state. The Great Barrier Reef is currently at its breaking point, and trapping endangered marine life only disrupts this ecosystems further. Queensland has the obligation to keep it safe. However, by keeping shark nets in the oceans, various endangered species like greenhouse sharks and whales are put into further danger. With that being said, the Queensland government must take this into an urgent consideration. Wouldn't you want your family to see one of Australia's greatest ecosystems in its most healthy, thriving state? Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
I call the youth member for Johnston.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
I rise to speak on the youth crime skyrocketing across rural Queensland, and our inadequate education system should be held accountable for their role in this. The fact is that as remoteness increases, school attendance declines. Now, some people will just assume this just reflects the people within these communities. And I'm telling you right now, if this is you, then you are part of the problem. You sit here with every opportunity at your fingertips, while these children can't even access an education that includes skills relevant within their community. These towns are built on that sense of community. And by not educating on the skills needed to keep these places alive, we are destroying them. Ultimately, we've created communities of fringe dwellers, where the youth feel isolated, angry, and ignored. As someone from a rural area, I see so much potential being thrown down the drain every day, and I cannot keep quiet until the youth in my community are considered, heard, and treated as equal members of our society. To put it simply, Queensland is just screwing themselves over and amplifying youth crime by disregarding us fringe dwellers.
Member, there is some unparliamentary language that would ask you to retract or withdraw that, please.
Apologies.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
I call the youth member for Stanley.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise to speak on the matter of the Police Powers and Responsibilities Amendment Bill, also known as Jack's Law. This bill extends the wanding powers of police in public transport and safe night precincts. However, I fear it may be seen as an excessive response and breed resentment. This bill was created due to the youth being caught carrying illegal weapons such as knives, despite the relevant offence is currently at one of its lowest rates for the last decade. Wanding, an already invasive procedure, can lead to even more invasive searching, an issue in itself as it can be considered an assault when unwarranted. However, this is exactly what is being authorised, for police to wand random people for up to 12 hours without reasonable suspicion. Blindly punishing people who are not armed with invasive procedures when we are not in an epidemic of knife crime is not the solution. And as the Premier kindly pointed out to The Guardian, out of the 16,000 people searched so far, about 200 were found with such items. This is 1.2%. Do we really want to be seen as the government to authorise invasive procedures against Queenslanders on a massive scale when only a small percentage are suspected of being armed? And to those who argue this may prevent crime before it happens, whatever happened to the presumption of innocence? Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
I call the youth member for Barcoo.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I draw the attention of the House to the current pollution that is plaguing within our oceans at the Gold Coast. How is it fair that our future generations are not going to be able to experience the clear blue waters, or even observe the wonderful nature within our oceans, all because of selfish and ignorant people that are too lazy to even pick up their own rubbish? Across the Gold Coast, there should be more bins on the proximity of the beach. The lifeguards should have the responsibility of placing bins at each of the red and yellow flags and bringing them in at the end of each day, but need to be paid to do so. Furthermore, for this or any idea to work, people need to take responsibility for their own actions and pick up their litter. Doing these acts, the pollution will decrease in the oceans and allow the future generations to experience what we get to in our oceans. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
I call the youth member for Pioneer.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise to inform the House that the Big Data Bill is negatively impacting my constituents of the Pioneer region. In relation to Clause 6, Subclause E of the Big Data Bill, it states that DNA may be compulsorily collected, stored and identified in relation to specific public safety and welfare programs. If DNA is compulsorily collected and stored, then the risk of DNA being hacked is extremely high, putting the privacy of Queensland citizens at risk. Last year, Medibank was believed to be hacked by the REvil ransomware group in Russia, affecting many Australians, including many Queenslanders. The personal data that was stolen consisted of thousands of names, addresses, dates of birth, phone numbers, email addresses, and gender identifications. This has shocked my constituents as they do not want their private health information made public, and they do not want to be the victims of identity theft. The citizens of my electorate are hardworking people who deserve to have their health data remain private and stored safely and securely. I take issue with this data bill on behalf of the people of Pioneer. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Call the Youth Minister for Housing.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise to inform the House of the pressing issue of the treatment of modern-day housing that is manufactured and then neglected when it could be repurposed. Recently, the government has been approving and supporting companies to produce portable buildings and install them. One of these instances was with BMSA Portables, in which the government sent an invoice to install tiny homes as a means of quarantine centre during COVID-19. However, once the houses were built, they were deemed unnecessary as the threat had passed. It was then that the proposition of using them as homes for displaced people was brought up. Despite this, complaints are made about the comfort of the houses themselves and whether they were up to standard. The government, instead of stepping in, completely neglected them, and as such, they remain there today, uninhabited and taking up space, a poor excuse for wasting taxpayer money. It baffles me that such a simple idea with basic execution can skew so badly. As the Youth Minister for Housing, I believe it is worth considering that this can be fixed, and the houses refined in favour of simply neglecting them. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
I call the Youth Member for Don.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise to inform the House that within my electorate there is a serious issue, Mr. Speaker, about the youth of today. And now I don't rise to talk on youth crime as so many of my fellow members have also done. I rise to talk about an electric scooter epidemic within my electorate. I'm sure many members here will have seen electric scooters littering our roads and our streets. Now, the problem is that riders of these electric scooters do not need to pass any understanding of safety and laws regarding their vehicles and do not need to have their personal mobility devices registered. Now, when an old lady going to the bowls on the pension has to fork out money to register their mobility scooters, I'm surprised that these want-to-be gangsters littering our streets don't need to register their electric scooters. I acknowledge the works of the current government in implementing laws restricting speed capabilities and increasing fines in regards to violation of laws. But I'm calling on the government to do two more things: mandate registration of these vehicles and ensure that all riders have to pass a basic understanding of safety and laws so they can operate them without fear of causing the public harm. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Call the Youth Member for Burke.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As many of the members in this House have previously talked about, youth crime has become an increasingly concerning issue within our state. After a continuous pattern of crime since 2019, naturally you would have assumed that we would actually have been able to do something to prevent this by now. But however, this isn't the case. In Brisbane, unlawful use of a motor vehicle by young people has risen by almost 300% in the past 3 years, and unlawful entry has risen 77% within our youth. Not only has our state's motor vehicle-related crimes increased, but more than half of youth criminals released from prison are reoffending less than a year after being released. For citizens, these crimes that these youth are committing are not our only problems. Here in Queensland, we are spending around $300 million of the taxpayers' money on youth justice, which you would think would have caused the youth committing these crimes to learn their lesson. However, Queensland has managed to claim the title of state with the highest rate of youth reoffenders. Clearly, our current efforts haven't been working if we are continuing to encounter these rising numbers of children being indoctrinated into a criminal lifestyle. Mr. Speaker, if we aren't able to fix this problem within the time that these youth are attending school, we will have young criminals learning from their previous acts and building onto them as they go into adulthood. This government will continue to create law and policy that attends to the rehabilitation of young offenders. An example of these policies we could put in place is a program in which these offenders are placed in a course where they can, under supervision, gain working skills with the company during what would be their prison time. This benefits both the workforce and the youth, as companies do not have to pay these youth a regular wage, and the offenders find the opportunity to obtain skills necessary for entry into the workforce once they have completed their sentence. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Call the Youth Member for Baloo.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Today I rise to inform the House on the prevalent issue of the lack of equity in education. A study by the Australian Capital Territories government found that schools that have high-level equity are often the most successful in terms of intellectual performance. The lack of educational equity in Australia is distressing, as Australia is ranked 30th out of 38 developed countries for educational equity. Educational equity is the guarantee of a just society, as it upholds the rights of individuals outlined in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. The absence of equitable government funding is one of the major barriers for educational equity in Queensland. Moreover, low achievement in Queensland is found to be more common among students from low-income homes. These children are at risk
of generational poverty, as the lack of access to education can hinder cognitive ability and therefore impact required performance for a desired job. A study performed by the Australian Education Union found that there is a directly proportional relationship between a child's socio-economic status and their results in school. Therefore, I stand here today to urge the government to address this equity issue by increasing government funding for low socio-economic status students to target school retention and opportunities. Without this, individuals in these demographics will become stuck in a system of generational poverty. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Call the youth member for Cooper.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Today, I would like to bring to your attention the pressing issue of mental health for teenagers post-COVID. The pandemic has impacted the mental health of our youth in unprecedented ways, and it is essential that we take immediate action to address this. Many young people have experienced feelings of loneliness, depression, and anxiety, which can have long-term consequences if left unaddressed. During the pandemic, Headspace, a non-for-profit, interviewed 3,500 young people, and 74% of them reported that it had negatively impacted their mental health. It is crucial that we prioritise mental health support for teenagers in the post-COVID world by providing accessible and affordable mental health services and creating safe spaces for young people to express their feelings and concerns. Schools and community organisations can play a vital role in providing mental health support for teenagers, and it is essential that we invest in these resources now. All Queensland high school students should have face-to-face access to a school counsellor, whether in person or via a service like Zoom. Having to wait for this service is an injustice to our young people. I urge Parliament to prioritise mental health support for our teenagers. We must work together to provide the resources and support necessary for our young people to thrive in these challenging times. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
And call the Youth Minister for Primary Industries.
Thank you, Sir Speaker. I rise to speak on the Big Data Bill's effect on the primary industry of Queensland. Queensland has had many natural disaster emergencies in the past, such as the Black Summer bushfires of 2019 and the 2022 flooding crisis, had detrimental effects on all Queenslanders, but in particular Aussie farmers. These natural disasters will only increase with climate change. I believe that the implementation of drone and satellite surveillance in Queensland would help reduce environmental and economic damages to farmers. The data able to be collected through the Big Data Bill would provide early validation of fires caused by lightning strikes in deep bushland. In addition, the collection of big data could assist in the management of dam levels and flood paths. Surveillance would enable the possibility of automatic alerts to warn people of rising water levels and when to evacuate, so people have time to do so safely. In the midst of the climate crisis and increasing frequency of bushfires and floods that affect Queenslanders, this bill should be implemented into Queensland law. Thank you, Sir Speaker.
Honourable youth members, the House will now adjourn for morning tea.